Hello, everybody. I'm in the process of grading your timeline assignments and some of your other assignments, and I wanted to cover a few points with you. Most everybody did excellent work. Listen, in terms of the history of the family, and we're talking about families here, okay? Just because something was a historical event doesn't mean it affected a lot of families, okay? The moon landing and 9/11 did not affect millions of families, okay? If you were one of the 3,000 people who had a family member die, and that, of course, it affected you. But we're talking, this is a class in large-scale patterns. Now, let me give you some examples of historical events that people have come up with that nailed things, and some that didn't, okay? So just because an event is historically salient does not mean that it had an effect on families, okay? Some, like most political assassinations, right? No. I mean, political assassination, for example, of Dr. King, might have had a effect on millions of families of color because of that a lot of the kind of backlash from the government caused some negative reactions. So sometimes that's the case. But if you tell me that like the assassination of John F. Kennedy, that didn't affect most people's family. The moon landing didn't affect most people's families. Okay. 9/11 did not affect most people's families, okay? Most of you did a really good job in identifying like wars or natural disasters sometimes, occasionally, right? If you have something that affects millions of people, right, that's going to be, a historically significant event. And here's the important, second part of that sentence, that affects large numbers of families, okay? 9/11 did not affect that. That's, I think, for many people, one of their most salient memories. But, for example, I lived through, I'm 62, and I lived, through the assassination of John F. Kennedy. It didn't affect what was going on in the families around me. They continued on to do whatever they were going to do. Now you could make an argument that some of the current events that are going on now most certainly do affect, if not every family. Well, COVID-19 probably affects every family. Okay, the current in reaction to institutional racism and violence affects millions of families, okay, of color, right? So that would be an argument you could make. But yeah, just because something's historically, salient doesn't mean that it affects families. You can't just say because people were in a bad mood. 9/11, people went, they worked before and they worked after it, most people. They got divorced before and they got divorced afterwards. They had jobs before and they had jobs afterwards, okay? The only thing you could say about 9/11 that in terms of its effect was a one-off, okay? What happened was that in 9/11, now we can also talk about a sufficiently large number of people in military reserve families. And if you argued, for example, that 9/11 caused the activation of families in the National Guard and the Reserve into active duty forces as a disruptive, pattern, yes, then you could argue. But what I'm saying now is no. Just because people were freaked out, doesn't have any bearing on how it affects families. Okay. Not the long march of history or not the grand narrative of history, We're talking about historical events and patterns that affect families. Most of you got it, but I just wanted to let you know, if that was you, think a little more clearly about this. Okay? Thank you.